Hello. He's just following me all the time, you know. Doesn't know where to go. What way.
Well, it's fall here, and unfortunately, with the news that we've been seeing and hearing coming out of Russia, means that death is a big topic in the world, in Russia, and in general in the prism of the Ukrainian and Russian conflict. The question of dying for Russia, and the Russia I use in quotation marks because it's not really Russia, it's mostly like Putin and his pipe dreams and wet dreams and whatever kind of dreams you want to call them. It's these dreams that people are being put to slaughter for. So in this video I'm going to continue to talk about the situation around Ukraine and where that situation is headed in light of recent Russia's mobilization announcements. So this past week, Putin has announced mobilization of Russia's population.
За нашу победу, мужики!
Бать, спасибо, бать!
Я вас сейчас убил!
And this news is arguably the most high-profile news we've ever heard coming out of the Putin regime, and it's the first time that this population was mobilized since like World War II. And the funny thing is, though, is that the decree doesn't really say who is going to be mobilized. So of course protests started right away, and I guess those that went to those protests were kind of served draft papers right away. It was kind of funny if you ask me. Even more funny is that Peskov, Putin's spokesman, announced that there will be no mobilization the day before it was actually announced, and then the next day people essentially were taken off the street and giving these draft papers, and you know, just people were getting them in their homes and place of work and whatnot. But it gets even crazier. From what I can see, I think Russia's closing its borders. I mean, that's right, people are getting letters forbidding them, like preventing them from leaving the country. And how do I explain this to my Western audience? Well, let's just put it this way, like the communists in the Soviet Union made a plan and they must fulfill it. It doesn't really matter how they fulfill it, the most important thing is that they fulfill it. The plan is to take 1 million men out of their homes, out of their families, and throw them against the war machine, right? And it doesn't really matter whether you have eye problems, you have heart problems, you have diabetes, you have an operation on your knee. Forget about it, you're gonna go to war. Same if you have more than 4 children. Apparently there's a law that says that if you have more than 4 children that are underage, you are exempt from mobilization. But how many people really have more than 4 children in Russia? I mean, I don't think that's a really big number to speak of, really. But what will happen to those that have been mobilized? The idea is that they go on a 2-week training and they basically go to the front. And that basically says that the conscripts, really. There's all these other questions that kind of pop up, right? Like, do they have enough food? Do they have enough, like, equipment? It kind of remains a rhetorical question, really, because nothing is guaranteed in Russia, as we all know. Well, what's even more shocking, and I want to get your opinion on this, is that many Russians don't really care, and they have this attitude like, well, if they're calling me, then I might as well go. And others are saying, well, I kept using government benefits and all these government, you know, the good things that the government gave me or whatever throughout my life, and now I got to sort of repay my debt. And many people in Russia are just like not politically minded. They just kind of will go to the direction of the government tells them to. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I don't know, like of course you have some different people in Russia, and some people they're like with low level of intellect, and of course they're like там за мать, за родину, пойду воевать, you know, shit. And
Yeah.
some people, like half of people, they just watched what's going on, like the 7 months, how Russians killed our people, and they just like watched, and they're like, okay, we'll see what will be the next, and then it's a future like this, mobilization. So maybe somebody has opportunities, maybe some of them not.
Okay, but as a woman, like, what do you think is going through this woman's head in Russia that have a child, a husband, a brother? Like, how could they want them to go to war and not see them, perhaps, for the rest of their lives?
Some women in Russia are stupid. So, if they're stupid, okay, let's see. They will go to the war. Ukrainians will kill them, you know, and what then? They will suffer because they are stupid, you know. They will not have their sons, their children, their husbands because they're stupid. Who understand it, maybe they cannot like change the situation, you know, they have no other way or something. I don't know, I don't want to think about Russians and what they feel now, because our Ukrainian people feel and suffer more than
Well-
them, you know. So
Well, the whole idea that Russians are eager to go to the military commissariat's office is that it's ironic because Russia traditionally is a very conspiratorial-minded country. I mean, the people are like first in line to get fake COVID certificates, for example. It's a country that really was the number one in terms of COVID certificate. Everything is for sale, right? School diploma certificates, attestations, you can get anything you want for money, really. It's like almost like a rite of passage for any teenager to make fake documents to get cancellation of your draft papers, right? To just not go to the army whenever there's a calling for that. But the reality is, I think people just want to stay out of politics, and they don't really know and don't want to know how bad things are until it hits home. Like if it's somewhere else in Ukraine, it's happening, they don't really care. I mean, this passiveness is a price they have to pay for not being able to determine whether or not they're going to live and die, essentially. It's not in their hands anymore because they've given up that right. And we're seeing that happen. Like that's why there's huge lineups of people in Georgia, Kazakhstan, and Finland. Finland's actually going to close the borders to Russians. Russians will not be able to go through Finland anymore. So the only place they're going to be able to go through, like by land, is by Georgia or Kazakhstan. And also, plane tickets are getting very expensive. Like plane tickets are going up. Like some of them cost $10,000 US. Like a one-way flight to like Azerbaijan or something like that. It's funny. The reason that they're giving for closing the borders is because the inflow of tourists is too great for them. They can't handle so many Russian tourists. That's what they call them. They call them Russian tourists. But separate oblasts have published laws that prevent men from leaving these oblasts. So I think they're going to be in big trouble if they try to leave their cities from now on. Yeah, so like the crux of the matter is if you're over 18 and you live in Russia, I think you're in pretty big trouble right now. It doesn't really take much to see the obvious, and the fact that Russia will probably in the next few months shed a whole lot of blood to keep the land that they've taken over right now, and in hopes of keeping that land for I don't know how long they want to keep it, but they're not going to keep it forever. Eventually, Ukraine's going to take it all back. I don't know. I think most Russians, despite what's going on, they're still trying to stay optimistic in a funny way, and they're thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to get drafted this week. I'm going to get drafted maybe like in a month. Maybe I better go hide, like lay low in my grandma's village. And I don't think that's going to work for them because the situation is only going to get worse. And as the government gets more desperate, they're just going to try to they're just going to stand outside of the metro station and grab people off the metro. They're going to grab people off the street. They're going to grab people off when they stop them, give them the draft papers. That's going to happen, I mean, eventually, I think. The thing is, I think what we have to do is we have to look at history. Like, just look at America. Look at the problems that the war in Vietnam, for example, gave America. The problems that, not talking about combat victories. I'm talking about the people that came back from this war. There's tons of movies made about it. Most of the people that came back, they came back with mental problems. They beat their wives, they beat their children, they started doing drugs, and many of them killed themselves, you know? The fact of the matter is, more people killed themselves that came back from the war of Iraq than actually people died in the war. Do you know that? But
of course, because how can you live normally, like after this war, like after what happened with you and...
Yeah, and this problem is going to, regardless of how many people die right now, how many Russians die, for the next 20 years, Russian men are going to be traumatized. And this generation will be like a lost generation of people. People are going to be lost generation.
It's not only Russians, but Ukrainians also. They're like, you know how...
Ukrainians will be not conflicted about it. Russians are going to be conflicted about it. It's a social disillusionment that is like on a mass scale. We've never seen this before, ever.
I just wanted to say in conclusion that, I don't know, it's a big tragedy for the whole world. What the stupid old man just doing right now. And I don't know.
Well, I think in the end it just shows that Putin doesn't care about people. I mean, if people weren't sure before, I mean, they're going to be pretty sure right now that he doesn't care about people as much as he doesn't care about like anything else, like logistics, equipment, giving them a good, even like clothing them with clothes for the winter, giving them enough food, giving them enough helmets, high-tech guns, night visions, like, I don't know, armor, you know, bulletproof vests. I don't think Russians expect to be sort of prepared in any meaningful way when they're going to face the Ukrainian army. You know, supply chain network, the Russian logistics network, it's not made to support any of that. Like, that's another thing people have to understand. All the statements that Western leaders are saying, like, you know, let's give Ukraine more guns, more tanks, more airplanes, that's just going to even intensify. It's going to increase. You have to look at all these side effects that are going to happen, you know, as a result of this announcement of this mobilization. So in conclusion, there's only one word I can use, and that is chaos. First, it was a 3-day special military operation that extended to months. Lately, it's Russia sacrificing even more troops to gain inches of territory. And then we've seen a whole flank collapse and all of Ukraine's Kharkiv region liberated. And then we've seen this decision of holding these fake referendums, which are going on right now as we speak, in Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donbass, and Luhansk regions. And it's also interesting to note that recently we had 200 Azov fighters, which, by the way, were freed, and which, by the way, was the primary reason of starting this military operation in the first place. I mean, Russia was crazy. They were crazy frightened of these Azov fighters, and now they release them, right? And for who do they release it? They release them for none other than Putin's daughter's godfather. And that was the other way around, I don't know, whatever, the guy's like a friend of Putin. And now, what we see is 300,000 people going to be conscripted, and I think it's going to be a lot more. It's going to be close to like 1 million. To certain death, yeah. I think most of them will not make it home in one piece, for sure. Which I think makes it a life or death fight for the people of Russia, and not just like I said, it's the whole national tragedy that's happening over there. And the date when it was announced, September 21st, 2022, will mark a turning point, not in the war only, but in the actual existence of the Russian, you know, nation, I think, in a way. Anyway, I think that will be it, guys, for the war. I don't really like making videos about it. I think it's a pretty negative thing to talk about, and I hope there's no more negative views that come out of Russia or Ukraine, so I don't have to make videos about it, you know. And anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and have a good one, and until next time.